My name is William Tsai. I'm from Leeds University in the UK. And I'm the Deputy Director of Center for Governance Leadership and Global Responsibility. And today I'm very honored to chair this session, the English-speaking session. And everyone is supposed to speak English, but however, if you cannot, maybe we have some translator. I think our moderator, Professor Shyam Ajin, can translate.
I'm a moderator, but not a translator.
Yeah.
It requires a different set of expertise that I don't have.
Yeah.
It's all right. I'll do my best.
All right. Okay. Right. And today we have two presentations. And originally we scheduled for 4, but now we only have 2 here. So that means we have enough time for 2 hours. And I would suggest each presentation has a half an hour, right? 30 minutes presentation. And after 2 presentations, our moderator and Shyam will have comments for each presentation. And then we have free questions and answers and free discussions after the 2 presentations. Is that okay? Right? Okay, let's start with the first one. The presentation is Financialization in Search for New Studies. And we have 4 presenters, right? You represented 4.
5.
Yeah,
including me.
Yeah. Your name is
Adam
Sakis. Yeah. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation, introduction, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, as I said, I am Adam Sakis from University of Paris 13, and we are working on this paper with my colleagues from my university. This is an analysis we have recently started, and we are progressing only slowly due to a sizable amount of data cleaning and putting the data in a kind of workable format. So our primary aim is to figure out if there are signs of early steps of an interdisciplinary studies, echoing like previous examples like science and technology studies, innovation studies, or gender studies, or it's only about a new research field with limited scope, restricted to a rather small number of isolated people, disciplines, and research environments. In either case, we would like to identify its main characteristics via a kind of thorough analysis of the work published on the subject so far, from the perspective of the authors who have focused on the subject, their intellectual sources, their research environments, their cross-disciplinary fields, etc. Thus, our motivation for such a purpose is the need to include all disciplines work on financialization into a review, which can only be done through a quantitative analysis. To perform our analysis, we consider that sufficient new knowledge has been generated so far in the last 2 decades on financialization. And our inspiration for this methodological choice is the 2012 article of Jan Fagerberg and his colleagues. Fagerberg is a well-known innovation and innovation policy scholar from Norway. And in their work, they identified the core contributions to the innovation literature and their users to draw inferences about the structure of the knowledge base on innovation, as well as its evolution. We follow to a large extent their methodology, but with some important modifications. To start with, here you can see the growth of the number of work written on financialization, that is published material containing the word financialization in titles, abstracts, or among keywords. As you see, it actually took off in 2008 and continuously increased in the following years. From around one publication out of 100,000 in 2008 to more than 1 publication out of 10,000 in 2018. And here you can see the cumulative growth of these publications across years. at the end of 2018, it is about almost 2,000 publications indexed on Scopus database since '92. And you can also see the reason why we chose actually Scopus instead of Web of Science. As more work is indexed on Scopus, and the main reason of the difference is that Scopus also indexed some books, many books actually. We decided to use Scopus also because we intentionally wanted to include books written on financialization, as knowing that authoring books is a kind of important publication strategy for human and social scientists. So our methodology is constructed in consecutive stages. In the first stage, we downloaded all the published work, I mean all those work containing the word financialization, and we call them first-hand literature. I now want to continue with the first stage, and I will just later describe the following stages. So, for the period until the end of 2017, we have around 1,523 publications on financialization, and more than 85% of them are journal articles. And the rest is predominantly about books and book chapters. We observe fairly a kind of wide occurrence of articles on financialization in large number of journals. And as you see, the first two rows, around like 44-45% of the work has been published in a total of 68 journals. There is fairly enough space to diffuse and enlarge the discussion on financialization. And here you can see the top academic journals used by this first-hand literature. They are anonymously heterodox journals in the case of economics journals. But an important observation we already elaborated further is the existence of research published in several geography journals, like number 4, number 6, number 9, number 10, those well-known geography journals. And here you can see the distribution of publications by subject area of the journals. In effect, Scopus attributes subject areas to journals and also to books actually, and in many cases it attributes more than one subject area to a journal, or even sometimes to a book. We chose to call interdisciplinary those for those with more than one subject area, and then we calculated percentages accordingly. As you see, more than half of the publications appeared on venues that can be considered as interdisciplinary. The areas followed by social sciences, which is still kind of interdisciplinary, but rather in a kind of limited way. And it's followed by economics and business areas and others. And here you can see the distribution of publications by country. And interestingly, it is actually the UK, the United Kingdom, which is the top country of affiliation for the authors of the first-hand literature, followed then by the US. And in the second stage, so we constituted core literature by listing the bibliographies, listing the reference lists of the first-hand literature in a kind of standard form that allows us to identify the core contributions to their research, to the research of the first-hand literature. It has more than 90,000 citations, references, sorry. The idea is that some work are likely to be frequently cited because they are somehow considered to be particularly central to the research on financialization. And then we rank these work by the number of citations they get from the first-hand literature, and we calculate a J-index score for each work cited. And J-index rating is a method which allows to avoid the problem that older titles have a kind of greater chance of being cited more than the more recent publications. It means that an article or book published in, for example, 2000 and received like 50 citations, has a smaller J index than an article or book published in 2010 but still received like 50 citations, which means that the one published more recently gets a higher J index score in order to avoid this problem. Accordingly, we identified 90 core publications after we set a satisfying threshold level of the J index, which is actually 2.5, based on the formula. Here you can see the top 10 of this 90 as the intellectual sources for the first-hand literature. As you see, some of the core publications are already on financialization actually. So they are actually also among the first-hand literature, among this 1,500 something. Actually, there are 36 of them among 90. And this finding suggests that financialization literature not only citing most important previous work, but also it is also benefiting from itself. And here is the second 10, and finally one older work, like Marx Capital Volume 1 is there, and works of names like Marx, Keynes, Minsky, Polanyi, Ferdinand, and even Jensen and Mecklick, their famous article is in the top 90, using the core. So part of our plan is to just discuss the core literature also, of course, and we want to categorize the core literature, core publications by their publication years under 3 groups. The first group we call the work of actually grandfathers, founding grandfathers of today's financialization literature. Here you see the top 5 of this group. The second group, founding mothers and fathers, was published in the second half of the last century. And here's the top 10 of the last group of works published since 2001. And as I said, many of them are already actually on financialization. So following the methodology introduced by Fagerberg, in this third stage, we also identified all the users of the knowledge generated by the core literature. In this way, we wanted to move the core literature to the center of our analysis, not only as an identified source of first-hand literature, but also kind of source of inspiration for a much wider set of researchers with particularities, maybe similar, maybe different than the first-hand literature. So we identified around 124,000 citations to the core literature, and we call them users of the core literature. Here you can see this time research environment of the users of the core, and similar to the first-hand literature, the users are mostly from Anglo-Saxon countries, but geographically it's rather just kind of equally distributed between Europe, North America, and rest of the world. And this is the major subject areas of the publication venues of the users. In this case of users journals, we haven't created an interdisciplinary category. Due to a kind of very high number, it's in thousands, of course, those journals, of the 124,000 publications. They are just so automatically weighted by Scopus, which eliminates the possibility to just detect interdisciplinary ones. And similar to the first-hand literature without interdisciplinary category, it starts with social sciences and then continues with other disciplines, but the weight of arts and humanities and business and management, they are still a bit kind of higher. And here are the journals where the users publish the most. Starting with Cambridge Journal of Economics. Many heterodox journals, but there are also many non-heterodox or just non-economic journals among them. So having identified the first-hand literature and core literature, analyzed their characteristics and mapped the users of the core, we now use this information to explore the structure of the knowledge base of financialization, and the method applied is cluster analysis. It's a kind of exploratory tool that sorts similar objects into groups, into clusters, so that the degree of association between objects is maximal if they belong to the same group, or minimal otherwise. Hence, literature that share the same type of characteristics and have similar just kind of users will tend to be sorted into the same cluster. And these are the variables for the analysis. I have already presented the country and the subject area of the first and third stages, and also the top journals of the third stage. And the top keywords from titles, abstracts, keywords of the first and second stages are about actually those most frequently used single words or compound words used in, again, titles, abstracts, and keywords of the first-hand literature, and also the core literature of those 90 publications. These parentheses are the number of just variables for each number of, kind of units for each variable. And discipline of the researcher in the middle, of the core, corresponds to the PhD of the author of the publication, except Marx and Smith. We just consider them as economists. And country of the researcher of the core is about the moment the writer actually drafted his work, his article or his or her article or book. So for the cluster analysis, just one last thing. These are quantitative, which means that they are in percentages, first and third, and the one in the middle, it's a qualitative. The values are in binary form. For the cluster analysis, our individuals are the individuals of the cluster analysis are the members of the core, those 90 publications, and all the values of each variable correspond to the value of the core publication. For example, the subject area of the first-hand literature is about the percentage of first-hand literature publications that cites the specific core publication. So we conduct a multiple factor analysis with the software R, combining continuous and factor variable in which each stage has the same weight. Like, for example, there are 3 groups of variables in the first stage. So if the first stage is already just 1/3, and there are 3 groups of variables, each 1/9. We do this, we do this in order to just avoid overweighting. So analysis is performed on those 90 individuals described by 141 variables in the year, 141 in total, producing 89 components. And here are the first 10 dimensions coming from the analysis. As it's seen, the first 2 dimensions explain a large part of the variance. And these are, for example, the first 5 dimensions, up to 5. And I will explain the first 3 actually. Here are the major variables of dimension 1. In this dimension, we observe actually kind of geography and social sciences versus economics proposition in terms of keywords, in terms of subject areas of both the first-hand literature and users, and also even the keywords. Keywords like stock market, like firms, mostly related to economics, but and keywords like economic, geography, financial system, we just consider that they are mostly used by geographers. And also in the qualitative part, in this binary variables, again the same observation. Here we have economics, we don't have geography. Here we don't have economics, we have geography, also among keywords. It continues like that. I mean, these are the most important variables of the opposite side of the axis, and these are the most important side of the positive side of the axis. Again, the geography versus economics opposition. Geography plus social sciences versus economics opposition. Second dimension is interesting. I mean, we observe here a UK versus US kind of opposition. In both countries of, for example, first-hand literature authors, countries of users, and also even keywords, like Latin America, United States versus like United Kingdom. And also Germany, for example, Europe is also still in this group. And European Union, like keyword. Again, in the disciplines case, it is the same. Here we have US, here we don't have, we have UK, we don't have. Goes like. And this is the third dimension, for example, and here we observe a corporate governance versus commodity markets opposition. It starts with keyword like commodity markets, future markets, price volatility, oil prices, versus corporate governance, shareholder value, management, governance, such a kind of position. And here in the qualitative part, it is about China, Australia versus the rest of the world, and non-China, non-Australia. So, here's the cluster dendrogram. The three cluster case is very visible to be chosen. And the first cluster in blue, and this part is particularly distinct from the other two. And here you can see the three clusters on a kind of dimension 1, dimension 2 system. Dimension 1 is the x-axis actually, and dimension 2 is on the y-axis. If I start with the first cluster, the blue circle, except actually two authors of this core literature, is Peter Hall, the co-author of the Varieties of Capitalism, and Adolf Berger, the co-author of the Modern Corporation and Private Property. All the individuals, all the publications, I mean the authors of those publications are economists. It's just kind of distinctively economics cluster. As I already showed, a dimension one side of the dimension one, it's just dominates the character of the cluster. There is no single individual on the positive side of the x-axis. I mean, dimension 1, it was like economics versus geography. And there is even no single individual on the geography side of this, for this cluster. And before the second one, I just would like to continue the third cluster, the green ellipse here, because it is just the opposite of the economics one, the dominant feature economics of the first one. And the other end of the first, as I said, is actually provides the main features, which is geography. Eventually, except actually Harvey, all the geographers of the 90 publications are in this cluster, except Harvey only. As I showed, I mean, geography is the main feature of this cluster, the positive of the x-axis, positive side of the x-axis. And for the second dimension, this UK-US axis, I mean, it's just almost purely UK dominated, this cluster, except one researcher here you see, he's actually originally British researcher from Sweden. I mean, he's actually also part of the UK, can consider as part of the UK group. And one other particularity, all the work of the Manchester group, those business scholars.
So just a clarification, would an author who is maybe published in a, say, geography journal, but who is an economist, show up as a geographer then in this analysis?
No, I mean, it depends on the results of the cluster analysis. It can happen that an economist can appear in another cluster or vice versa. I mean, it is the analysis which gives the results.
Yes, I get it. Sorry, got it.
And that was my last thing actually. Lapavitsas, two works of Lapavitsas, even though he's an economist, he's in this cluster. And Manchester group, those business scholars writing on financialization since 2000, they are all in this group. It's not only geography but also some management. And the cluster 2, actually, the orange ellipse is actually among those the biggest one. There are 35 individuals here, and also actually the most interdisciplinary one. And also the most geographically dispersed one. And all the political scientists, international relations scholars, philosophers are in this cluster, but also, I mean, all the sociologists and anthropologists, they are the ones dominating this cluster. And another major feature of this cluster that all those Marxian scholars are in this cluster, including Harvey, as I said, he's not in the geography one, but here he is. And like others like Foster and Magdoff, Lazzarato, and also Marx-inspired scholars like Ariki, they are all in this cluster. And Marx himself is also all these three works in the core. But as you see, I mean, they are pretty much to the center. Marx, Epstein. I mean, they cite Epstein mostly about the definition of financialization, as we know. I mean, he's very close to the center. That means that he is actually used by almost everyone working on financialization. And Marx is also pretty much close to the center, which means that, I mean, also people from other dimensions, I mean, individuals from other dimensions are also just using his work. And here are the individuals of the first cluster, the economics cluster. As I said, almost everyone here are economists. And this is the second cluster, this kind of social sciences, sociology cluster, this social sciences interdisciplinary cluster. I mean, those works of, I mean, among, we have, for example, 4 works of Harvey among this 90, among core, and they are all here. And this is the third cluster with individuals of the third cluster. As I said, all geographers are here, plus those business scholars, plus Lapavitsas. Yeah, 3, actually, he has also 3 permutations. So, I mean, the question is still out there if there is a studies emerging, but at least in terms of interdisciplinarity, which actually gives a kind of main feature to a kind of emerging studies, and also just observing that it is not only about economics, and it's also about other social sciences, and actually other social sciences are even more interdisciplinary than economics. Why not? Huh? Why not this kind of studies emerging around the financialization work? Thank you very much.
we have a second presentation. The presentation title is Financialization and the Macro Economy, Theory and Empirical Evidence. The presenter is Louis Ortiz. And representing 1, 2, 3.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to present you an article that I worked with my colleague and co-author who is here, Tomás Laguarda, and we were interested in studying some theoretical aspects of financialization we posited through a stock flow consistent model. So this work has been already published in economic modeling, which was not mentioned in the presentation. And we are focusing on the mechanism underlying the process. Beyond this mechanic, so to speak, model, there is empirical evidence that we also provided using some vector autoregressions techniques. So since I have more time than I was expecting, I'm gonna just talk a little bit more about the background. So I am an economist modeler. I work at AFD currently, and I'm gonna be joining Kent Business School in September. So I am currently working in the field of modeling, more particularly so in empirical modeling. So this work is more related to a simulated kind of model, but we are working currently with other colleagues. We're working on empirical versions of it. So the outline of the presentation is we're going to talk about the context, the theoretical model, and some results of this model, and then a little bit about the empirical analysis. This was made by Céline Gimet, who's not here. So I'm not an expert in this part. I'm gonna try to summarize it, and then I'm gonna conclude. So we are interested in studying the macroeconomic impact of financialization. We know that financialization has an impact on firms, particularly so financialized firms. We also know that also at the microeconomic level, these non-financial firms are affected by the evolution of certain key indicators and the information circulating surrounding their liabilities. We know that firms need these liabilities in order to fund their investments, and this is the point of departure. We realize that not many models make this link right away. Many of the models start talking about directly about indices of financialization. They talk about several things that are surrounding exchange rates, capital flows, interest rates, and all these indices. But they rarely make it a direct link from there to the liability structure, and from there to their investment decisions. We try to integrate this using a modeling technique, which is actually not novel because they talked about this before in plenary session B. So stock flow consistent models are well adapted to deal with this. So this is the first part of our work. We set up a stock flow consistent model that integrates all these aspects in a simplified way for a single closed economy. This model reveals that excessive leverage, we focus on leverage here, although we integrate also the stock markets in another way, I'll talk about this, that increases financial fragility, that reduces wages, physical investment, and economic growth. This is the first part of our work. The second part, as I said before, is a panel of 29 high-income countries that shows impacts of financialization. We use two indices. I'm going to talk about only one. And this financialization process has an impact on income distribution measured on a functional basis, that is to say, the share of wages in national income, gross capital formation, and GDP growth. So our results show that financialization has a detrimental impact on growth. We all knew this from the outset, but we're going to show some mechanisms that are actually our interpretation. So what is financialization? We saw some interesting statistics before, and our literature review is actually quite rich, although we did not, I just realized that we did not include Epstein. Sorry for that. But of course we all recognize the importance of this reference. So in macroeconomics, financialization is a pattern of accumulation in which profit making occurs increasingly through financial channels rather than through trade